In the bustling mall's forgotten corner, between a shuttered GameStop and a flickering vending machine, sits James Miller's humble tech repair booth. At 48, he's the kind of man who fixes things others throw away, finding dignity in giving broken gadgets a second chance. His weathered hands tell stories of 1,000 repairs, while his quiet smile masks the weight of raising a teenage daughter alone. When an elegantly dressed woman rushes in with a malfunctioning laptop, James does what he's always done: helps without expecting anything in return. Little does he know that this simple act of kindness is about to change everything. Could a broken laptop be the key that unlocks not just one, but 2 hearts searching for repair? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ancient coffee maker sputtered and hissed, a morning symphony James Miller had grown accustomed to over 15 years of faithful service. Like everything else in his life, he'd kept it running through careful maintenance and the occasional retrieved part from yard sales. Dawn light filtered through the small window of their apartment above rosewood books, casting warm shadows across the worn linoleum countertop. "Dad, have you seen my calculus notebook?" Sarah's voice carried from her bedroom, accompanied by the familiar sound of drawers opening and closing. At 17, she was already everything he'd hoped she'd become: brilliant, determined, and kind, just like her mother had been. "Check under your physics textbook," he called back, pouring 2 cups of coffee, one black for himself, one with a generous splash of cream and sugar for Sarah. She'd started drinking coffee last year, insisting it was purely for academic purposes. James knew better. She was trying to seem more grown up, just as he had at her age. The apartment wasn't much: 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, and a living room that doubled as James's home workshop. But they'd made it home. Photos lined the walls: Sarah's first day of school, science fair victories, father-daughter camping trips. Each image a testament to their journey together since Emily's passing 12 years ago. Sarah emerged from her room, calculator in one hand, notebook in the other. "Found it," she smiled, claiming her coffee cup. "You're still the best at finding things." "Comes with the territory," James replied, starting their breakfast ritual. 2 eggs each, toast, and whatever fruit was on sale at the corner market. "How's the scholarship application coming along?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Almost finished. Mrs. Henderson stayed late yesterday to review my essay. She thinks I have a real shot at MIT. Her voice carried that mix of excitement and anxiety that seemed to color all conversations about college lately. James nodded, trying to mask his own anxiety. MIT was Sarah's dream, and she had the grades for it. The acceptance rate was daunting. Enough, but the financial reality was something that kept him awake at night. Even with scholarships, the numbers he'd run made his stomach turn. "Dad?" Sarah's voice pulled him back to the present. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "That thing where you worry about money without saying you're worrying about money." She took a bite of toast. "I've been thinking maybe I could do community college first." "No." James's voice was firm but gentle. "We've talked about this. You apply where you want to apply. Let me worry about the rest." "But Sarah Elizabeth Miller, you're going to submit that MIT application. End of discussion." He softened his words with a smile. "Now eat your eggs before they get cold." The rest of breakfast passed with their usual comfortable chatter. Sarah's upcoming physics test, the latest documentary she'd discovered, James's regular customers at the mall. As she gathered her books, a crash from the apartment next door made them both jump. "Mrs. Chen's microwave again," Sarah said, rolling her eyes. "That's the 3rd time this month." James checked his watch. "I've got time before heading to the mall. Better see if she needs help." Sarah grabbed her backpack, then paused at the door. "Hey, Dad." "Thanks for everything." She hugged him quickly, then disappeared down the stairs, her footsteps echoing through the old building. James stood for a moment in the quiet apartment, surrounded by the remnants of their morning routine. The coffee maker gave one last, contented gurgle, as if agreeing that despite all their challenges, they were doing all right. Grabbing his tools, he headed next door to Mrs. Chen's apartment. Another day of fixing things was about to begin, and James wouldn't have it any other way. After all, in a world where most people threw broken things away, he'd made a life out of believing everything deserved a second chance at working right. James unlocked his booth at exactly 9:30 a.m., just as he had every morning for the past 8 years. The vintage multimeter his father had given him took its place of honor on the counter, a reminder of simpler times when electronics were built to last, and repairs were a matter of course, not convenience. "Morning, James," Mr. Peterson waved as he passed, mall-walking group in tow. "Still good for Friday? The wife's sewing machine's acting up again." "Always," James replied, settling into his morning routine. He arranged his tools with practiced precision, screwdrivers aligned by size, specialized picks in their leather roll, spare parts in carefully labeled drawers. The booth might be small, but every inch had its purpose. The mall was quiet this early, save for the distant hum of the cleaning crew's buffer and the soft jazz playing from the mall speakers. Perfect time for catching up on his backlog. He pulled out Mrs. Rodriguez's tablet, screen cracked but salvageable, and began the delicate work of separation and repair. "There you are." Linda from the coffee kiosk appeared with his usual morning coffee. "On the house today. You saved my son's gaming console last week, remember?" James tried to decline, but Linda had already disappeared, leaving the steaming cup on his counter. That was the thing about small towns. Kindness had a way of coming back around, even when you weren't looking for it. The morning progressed steadily. A teenager with a water-damaged phone. It just stopped working, she claimed, though James could smell the chlorine. An elderly gentleman struggling with his grandson's birthday present, a drone that refused to sync, a harried mother with 3 kids, and a tablet that had met an unfortunate end beneath a sippy cup. Each item told a story, and James listened to them all. The teenager admitted to the pool incident when James explained how he could tell. The elderly man shared stories about his own father's repair shop while James walked him through the drone's setup. The mother relaxed as her children became fascinated by James's careful disassembly of their tablet. "You're a miracle worker," she said when the tablet powered up. "Good as new, no miracles," James replied, his standard response. "Just patience and the right tools." Around noon, Tommy from the food court brought him a sandwich. Payment for fixing the register last month when their regular tech support wanted to charge emergency rates. James had done it for free, of course, but the mall's workers had their own way of keeping accounts. He was halfway through his lunch when Gloria shuffled in, clutching her ancient laptop. At 83, she was his oldest regular customer, still writing romance novels on a machine that had seen better days during the Bush administration. "James, dear," she began, placing the laptop before him like an offering. "It's making that sound again." He smiled, already reaching for his screwdrivers. "The fan bearing's probably loose again. How's chapter 12 coming along?" "Oh." Her eyes lit up. "My hero just discovered his love interest has been secretly running a detective agency all along. But now my keyboard's sticking on the letter S, and you know how many times you need that letter in a steamy scene." James chuckled, working as she talked. The laptop was a dinosaur, but he developed a certain fondness for it. Like Gloria herself, it refused to give up just because newer models had come along. A young couple stopped by with questions about data recovery from a corrupted hard drive. Their wedding photos were at stake. 5 years of memories trapped in a device that wouldn't boot. James quoted them his usual rate, then cut it in half when he saw their faces fall. "But how will you make any profit?" the husband asked. James shrugged. "Some things matter more than profit." He thought of Sarah's college fund, still woefully short, but pushed the worry aside. Some decisions weren't about money. As afternoon settled in, he tackled his more complex repairs. A gaming console with a fried motherboard that everyone else had declared hopeless. A smartphone with a mysterious battery drain that had stumped 3 other repair shops. Each problem was a puzzle, and James had always been good at puzzles. The multimeter caught the light as he worked, its worn brass fittings gleaming dully. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Electronics are just like people, son. Sometimes they just need someone to take the time to understand what's really wrong." James smiled at the memory. His father would have loved to see this. His son, carrying on the family tradition of fixing broken things, even if the technology had changed. The world might be rushing toward disposable everything, but here, in his little corner of the mall, James was keeping something valuable alive. The simple belief that most things, with enough care and attention, could be made right again. The afternoon lull had just settled in when James heard the clicking of heels against tile, rapid and purposeful. Looking up from a particularly stubborn iPhone repair, he saw her, a woman who seemed somehow both perfectly in place and utterly foreign to the mall's modest setting. Her charcoal grey suit spoke of boardrooms rather than food courts, and the laptop she clutched was a top-of-the-line model that cost more than James made in 2 months. But it was her expression that caught his attention, a familiar mix of frustration and desperation that crossed all social boundaries when technology failed at precisely the wrong moment. "Excuse me," she said, slightly breathless. "I know this is short notice, but is there any chance you can help?" She placed the laptop on his counter with the careful reverence of someone handling a crucial tool rather than a luxury item. "I have a presentation in—" She checked her watch. 3 hours, and suddenly it won't boot up. James gestured to the chair he kept for customers. "Mind if I take a look?" She glanced at the chair, then at her watch again. "I should really find an official service center, which would take at least 2 days to even look at it." James finished already, reaching for his tools. 3 hours, you said? Something in his calm confidence made her pause. She nodded, perching on the edge of the chair as if ready to flee at any moment. "I'm James," he offered, opening the laptop with practiced care. "And you are?" "Elizabeth," she replied, then added almost reluctantly, "Elizabeth Chen." The laptop's chassis was warm to the touch, too warm. James didn't need his father's multimeter to diagnose this problem. He'd seen it 100 times before. "When did you last shut it down completely?" "Shut down?" Elizabeth frowned. "I always just close the lid." James nodded, hiding his smile. Some things were universal, regardless of the price tag. "First thing we'll try is a proper cooling down period. While we wait, want to tell me about this presentation?" She hesitated, then seemed to decide that conversation was better than watching him work in silence. "It's about implementing sustainable practices in tech manufacturing, reducing waste, extending product life cycles, ethical repair policies." James's hands paused briefly over the keyboard. "Sounds like something worth saving." "It is." For the first time, her professional demeanor cracked slightly. "This could change how our entire industry approaches repairs and sustainability. If I can just get the board to listen." Working steadily, James extracted the solid-state drive while they talked. Elizabeth's passion for her project was evident, even if she was careful not to mention her company's name or her position. He found himself sharing his own perspectives on repairs, built from years of hands-on experience. "You know," he said, carefully reinstalling the drive after checking its connections, "most people don't realize that fixing things is about more than just replacing parts. Sometimes it's about understanding why something stopped working in the first place." Elizabeth leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean? Take your laptop. Sure, it overheated because you never fully shut it down. But the deeper issue is that manufacturers don't make it clear enough how important that is. They assume everyone knows, or they figure it's easier to sell a replacement than educate users." A strange expression crossed Elizabeth's face. "You sound like you've given this some thought." James shrugged, pressing the power button. The laptop hummed to life, its screen brightening. Hard not to. In my line of work, every day I see people ready to throw away perfectly good devices because they think repair is too expensive or too much trouble. Elizabeth quickly checked her files, relief visible on her face when she found everything intact. "How much do I owe you?" "No charge," James said, already turning to his next repair. "Just remember what we talked about when you give that presentation. Maybe mention that sometimes the best solutions are the simple ones." She stood, smoothing her suit. "I can't just—" "Sure you can," he smiled. "Consider it my contribution to sustainable practices." Elizabeth studied him for a moment, then carefully placed her business card on his counter. "Thank you, James. You've given me a lot to think about." As she walked away, her heels clicking with renewed purpose, James glanced at the card. The embossed logo made his eyes widen slightly, but he simply tucked it into his drawer. Rich or poor, CEO or intern, everyone's. Technology needed fixing sometimes. That's what his father had taught him, and that's what he'd always believed. Besides, he had 3 more repairs to finish before picking up Sarah from her study group. The world of corporate presentations and boardrooms could wait. He had his own small corner of the universe to maintain. Evening settled over the apartment like a worn blanket, comfortable in its familiarity. James sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the day's quiet aftermath. Sarah's college application spread across one half, his repair ledger open on the other. The business card from earlier caught his eye, its golden emboss catching the light. Elizabeth Chen, CEO, Tech Future Industries. "Dad, you won't believe what happened today." Sarah burst in from her room, waving a letter. Her enthusiasm, momentarily, pushed aside his thoughts about the mysterious CEO. "Remember that essay I wrote about sustainable technology and ethical manufacturing?" James smiled, thinking of his earlier conversation. "The one you stayed up until midnight perfecting? Mrs. Henderson submitted it to that national STEM competition, and I made the finals." She thrust the letter into his hands, practically bouncing. "First prize is a full scholarship to any participating university. And guess what? MIT is on the list." Pride swelled in his chest, momentarily drowning out the constant worry about college costs. "That's my girl! Have you told Grandma Rose yet? Called her right after school. She cried, of course." Sarah dropped into the chair across from him, her eyes falling on his ledger. The excitement in her face dimmed slightly. "Dad, how are we really doing? And don't say fine like you always do." James closed the ledger, choosing his words carefully. "We're managing. The booth's steady, and I've got that weekend work at Mr. Wilson's computer shop." "I saw you skip lunch again today," she said quietly. "I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. I know what sacrifices you're making." Before he could respond, a frantic knock interrupted them. Through the door's frosted glass, they could make out Mrs. Chen's distinctive silhouette. "James." "Oh, James, are you home? It's smoking again." Sarah rolled her eyes affectionately. "Go. Save another microwave. We'll finish this talk later." In Mrs. Chen's apartment, the ancient microwave sat accusingly on her counter, a thin tendril of smoke rising from its vents. The elderly woman wrung her hands. "I only wanted to heat my tea, then it made that terrible noise again." "Let's take a look," James said soothingly, already reaching for his toolkit. As he worked, he noticed something odd. A sleek black car, parked across the street, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlights. In all his years in the neighborhood, he'd never seen anything quite so expensive parked there. Mrs. Chen followed his gaze. "Oh, it's been there all afternoon. Very mysterious. My soap operas never have such interesting developments." James refocused on the microwave, but something nagged at the back of his mind. The business card in his ledger seemed to weigh heavier, somehow. Back in his apartment an hour later, Sarah had fallen asleep on the couch, her college applications still scattered around her. James carefully gathered them up, pausing at her STEM competition essay. The title caught his eye. "Rebuilding Tomorrow, the Case for Ethical Technology Repair." He thought of Elizabeth Chen's presentation, the passion in her voice when she spoke, about sustainability. The universe had a funny way of weaving connections, his father used to say. Like circuits on a motherboard, everything connected somewhere if you looked hard enough. A message notification lit up his ancient phone. Mr. Wilson asking if he could cover an extra shift this weekend. The pay would be good, but it would mean missing Sarah's science club presentation. Before he could respond, another text came through from an unknown number. Thank you for today. The presentation was a success. Your insights about repair education made quite an impression. E.C. James stared at the message, wondering how she'd gotten his number, then remembered he always wrote it on the repair receipts, even for free fixes. He typed and deleted several responses before settling on a simple, "Glad I could help." The black car was still there when he went to close the blinds. In the streetlight's glow, he could just make out a figure in the back seat. The blue light of a laptop screen illuminating their face. Sarah stirred on the couch. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Nothing," he said, drawing the blinds. "Just thinking about coincidences." "You always say there's no such thing as coincidences," she mumbled sleepily. "Just opportunities we haven't understood yet." James smiled, covering her with a blanket. "When did you get so wise?" "Learned from the best," she murmured, drifting back to sleep. He returned to the kitchen table, opened his ledger again, and looked at Elizabeth's card. Something was shifting. He could feel it, like the moment before a broken device finally sparked back to life. Whether it was opportunity or coincidence hardly mattered. What mattered was being ready when chances for change appeared. The black car was gone when he checked again, but its presence lingered like a promise, or perhaps a warning, of things to come. Dawn had barely touched the sky when the sound shattered the morning quiet, a deep, resonant roar that rattled windows and set off car alarms along Main Street. James was already up, fixing the coffee maker that had finally surrendered after 15 years of faithful service, when Sarah burst into the kitchen. "Dad, there's a jet, an actual private jet, landing at Miller's Field." The local newspaper would later describe it as the most exciting thing to happen in Preston Falls since the governor's campaign stop in '98. Miller's Field, technically an airstrip but mostly used for Frank Miller's crop dusting, had never seen anything like the sleek Gulf Stream that touched down at 6:47 a.m. "Probably lost," James muttered, still focused on the coffee maker's internal workings. But even he had to admit private jets didn't usually get lost over small Pennsylvania towns. Mrs. Chen's voice carried through the thin walls. "James! James! Turn on Channel 5, we're on the news." Sarah had already grabbed the remote. The local morning show cut between footage of the jet and excited speculation. Sources confirm the aircraft belongs to Tech Future Industries, one of the world's leading technology companies. CEO Elizabeth Chen is rumored to be the coffee maker forgotten. James watched as familiar faces filled the screen. Half the town seemed to have gathered at Miller's Field, their breath frosting in the morning air. Mr. Peterson's mall-walking group had apparently detoured from their usual route. Gloria clutched her ancient laptop, perhaps hoping for another repair. Even Tommy from the food court was there, handing out coffee to the growing crowd. "Breaking news!" The reporter's voice crackled with barely contained excitement. "We can confirm that Elizabeth Chen, CEO of Tech Future Industries, has indeed arrived in Preston Falls. Sources suggest she's here on personal business, though the nature of that business remains." James thought of the business card in his ledger. The text message, the black car. Surely this wasn't... "Dad," Sarah's voice was hushed. "Isn't that the woman from yesterday? The one with the laptop?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Good morning, James. I hope you don't mind the dramatic entrance. Small towns deserve grand gestures sometimes. Would you mind meeting me at your booth? There's something I'd like to discuss." E.C. Sarah read the message over his shoulder, her eyes wide. "Dad, do you know what this means?" It means I'm going to be late opening the booth, he said, trying to maintain normalcy even as his world tilted sideways. Dad! She grabbed his shoulders. Elizabeth Chen, the Elizabeth Chen, came to your booth yesterday. You fixed her laptop, and now she's back, with a private jet, which changes nothing, he said firmly, though his heart raced. I've got repairs scheduled, people counting on me. Sarah gave him the look she reserved for when she thought he was being particularly dense. Those people are all at Miller's. Field right now, watching history happen. Come on, Dad. Even you have to admit this is incredible. The morning news showed the jet's door opening, a flash of familiar grey suit visible before the camera angle shifted. James thought of his father's words about opportunities and preparation, about circuits connecting in unexpected ways. You should wear your blue shirt, Sarah said, already heading to his room. The one without the coffee stains. Sarah, Dad. She returned with the shirt. Sometimes the universe hands you a moment. Remember what you always tell me about being ready when opportunity appears, he finished. It was his father's phrase originally, passed down like the multimeter that still sat in his toolkit. Outside, car engines rumbled as the town slowly migrated from Miller's Field toward the mall. The morning news switched to helicopter footage, tracking a small convoy of black cars threading through Preston Falls' modest streets. James looked down at his coffee maker, parts spread across the counter like a paused moment in time. For 15 years, it had reliably started his mornings, asked nothing but basic maintenance, served him without complaint. Now, like so many things, it had reached a turning point. Repair, replace, or reimagine. Okay, he said finally, picking up his toolkit. But I'm bringing the multimeter, Sarah grinned. Would a master craftsman go anywhere without his tools? As they headed down the stairs, Mrs. Chen called out, "Good luck, James. Tell her about my microwave." The morning sun painted Preston Falls in shades of possibility, and somewhere between the airstrip and the mall, opportunity was making its way toward him. The mall hadn't opened yet, but a small crowd had already gathered near James's booth. Through the glass doors, he could see reporters setting up cameras, their equipment casting odd shadows in the early morning light. Security guards in suits, definitely. Not the mall's regular team, stood at strategic points throughout the corridor. Mr. Miller, a young woman in a crisp pantsuit approached, tablet in hand. I'm Amanda, Ms. Chen's assistant. She'll be here shortly. Would you prefer to have this conversation somewhere more private? Before James could answer, the mall's main doors opened. Elizabeth Chen walked in, somehow looking even more commanding than yesterday. Her grey suit was replaced by a deep blue, one that probably cost more than James's annual rent. Two men flanked her, both carrying briefcases, but she waved them back as she approached the booth. "James," she smiled, "warmer than yesterday. I hope you don't mind the early meeting. Corporate. Jets run on their own schedule, I'm afraid." "Ms. Chen," he nodded, suddenly aware of his familiar but worn surroundings. Quite an entrance for a laptop repair follow-up. She laughed, genuine and unexpected. "Please call me Elizabeth, and this isn't about the laptop, though your repair work was impeccable." She turned to Amanda. "Could you give us a moment and perhaps keep Sarah company? I believe she's trying very hard to look busy at the bookstore entrance." James glanced over to see his daughter pretending to read a display poster, poorly hiding her intense interest in the proceedings. Sarah gave a sheepish wave when she realized she'd been spotted. Once they were alone, or as alone as one could be with discreet security personnel and distant cameras, Elizabeth's demeanor shifted slightly, becoming more personal. "Yesterday, you said something that stuck with me," she began. "About understanding why things stop working, not just fixing them. It resonated deeply with what I've been trying to accomplish at Tech Future." She opened her briefcase, removing a folder. "Your approach to repairs, your philosophy about sustainability and second chances, it's exactly what our industry needs. Not just fixing devices, but fundamentally changing how we think about technology, life cycle management." James leaned against his counter, his father's multimeter a reassuring presence beside him. That sounds ambitious. It is. And that's why. I'm here. She placed the folder between them. I want you to help me build something new, a complete reimagining of how Tech Future approaches repairs and sustainability. Not just a service department. A whole new division focused on extending product life cycles, educating users, and making repairs accessible to everyone. She opened the folder, revealing detailed proposals and contracts. Full creative control over the division. A team of engineers at your disposal, resources to implement your ideas on a global scale. She paused, meeting his eyes, and a salary that would make any college tuition concerns disappear. James's hand drifted to the multimeter, his father's voice echoing in his memory. Sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as impossible choices. Why me? He asked finally. There are thousands of qualified engineers. Engineers we have, Elizabeth interrupted gently. What we need is someone who understands the human side of technology, someone who sees repair as more than just a business transaction, she smiled. Someone who fixes CEO laptops for free because he believes in the principle of it. James thought of Sarah's college dreams, of all the devices he'd saved from landfills, of his father's lessons about responsibility and opportunity. It would mean leaving Preston Falls. The main office is in Boston, Elizabeth confirmed, but think of what you could build. A network of repair centers, training programs, sustainability initiatives, your philosophy scaled to help millions. She hesitated, then added more softly, and MIT has an excellent engineering program, I hear. The morning sun had finally reached the booth, warming the tools James had arranged so carefully over the years. Each one had a story, a purpose, a memory attached. But tools, his father always said, were meant to build things, not anchor you in place. I'd need time, he said carefully, to think it through. Talk to Sarah, of course. Elizabeth stood, straightening her suit. Take the weekend, review the proposal, ask questions. I'll be in Boston, but you have my number. She paused, then added with a slight smile. And James, the salary offer on page 3? It's negotiable. I believe in paying for expertise. As she turned to leave, she glanced at the multimeter. Vintage Fluke 87. Your father's? James nodded, surprised. My grandfather had the same model in his repair shop in Taiwan. Some tools never go out of style. She handed him her card, a different one this time, with her direct line. Like some principals. The crowd outside had grown, phones recording through the glass, but Elizabeth seemed to take it in stride. At the door, she turned back one last time. Oh, and James, thank you again for fixing my laptop. You were right. Sometimes the simple solutions are the best ones. After she left, James sat in his booth, surrounded by the familiar tools and parts that had defined his life for so long. Through the glass, he could see Sarah deep in conversation with Amanda, her face alight with possibilities. The proposal folder sat before him, heavy with promise and change. Like any good repair job, he knew, the first step was understanding exactly what needed fixing and what was already working just fine. The weekend crept by like molasses in January. James sat at his kitchen table late Sunday night, surrounded by the artifacts of his decision-making process. Elizabeth's proposal folder, Sarah's college applications, and an old family photo album he hadn't opened in years. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten during hours of deliberation. The photo that held his attention showed his father's repair shop. Murray's Fix It, the hand-painted sign proudly proclaimed. A teenage James stood beside his father, both holding tools, both smiling at some long-forgotten joke. The multimeter now sitting on his table was visible in the background, already old even then. Can't sleep either? Sarah padded into the kitchen, wrapped in her mother's old quilted robe. Just thinking, James replied, turning another page in the album. About Boston? Sarah pulled up a chair, tucking her feet underneath her like she used to do as a child. Or about leaving. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. The mall's regular customers had been stopping by all weekend, each visit feeling increasingly like a goodbye. Mrs. Chen had brought dumplings, insisting that Boston wouldn't have ones quite as good. Gloria had tearfully declared she'd never trust another person with her ancient laptop. Even Mr. Peterson's mall walking group had modified their route to pass by the booth more frequently, as if memorizing its presence. "Your grandfather sold his shop too, you know," James said finally, tapping the photograph, "when the big box stores came to town. Everyone thought he was giving up, but he saw it differently. What did he see? An opportunity to teach others. He spent his last 10 years training repair technicians for those same stores. Said he was scaling up his impact, though we didn't use fancy corporate terms like that back then." Sarah studied the proposal folder. "Is that what Ms. Chen is offering? A chance to scale up your impact?" Among other things, James pulled out the salary page, still stunned by the number of zeros. "She's offering security, Sarah, real security. Your college, your future." "Dad," Sarah's voice was firm, "you know I got that scholarship interview next week. And community college is still not an option," James interrupted, then softer. "Not anymore, at least." He stood, walking to the window. The street below was quiet, but he could picture the usual morning scene. Mr. Peterson's group power walking past. Tommy delivering yesterday's unsold pastries to the shelter. Mrs. Chen practicing Tai Chi in the small courtyard. A community built one relationship at a time. "You know what scares me most," he admitted. "Not the change, not Boston, not even the corporate world. It's the idea that I might be betraying something. A principle, a way of life, like replacing. Something that could be fixed." James turned, surprised by her insight. "Something like that." Sarah joined him at the window. "You always tell people that sometimes fixing things means understanding why they broke in the first place. Maybe," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "maybe this is like that. Maybe the whole system is what needs fixing." From his table, his father's multimeter caught the streetlight, its worn brass fittings gleaming softly. James remembered Elizabeth's words about her grandfather's identical model, about principles that never go out of style. "When did you get so wise?" he asked, pulling Sarah into a half-hug. "Must be those repair shop genetics." She grinned, then grew serious. "Dad, whatever. You decide, I'm with you, but I saw your face when Miss Chen talked about building something bigger, about helping more people. You looked like you did when you first taught me how to fix Mom's old radio, like everything made sense." James thought about the proposal, about Elizabeth's vision of repair centers across the country, about training programs and sustainability initiatives. He thought about his father teaching corporate technicians, passing on not just skills, but values. His phone lit up with a text. "Decision time approaching. Remember, some things are worth rebuilding from the ground up. EC." Sarah read the message over his shoulder. "She doesn't give up easily, does she?" "No." James smiled slightly. "She doesn't." He picked up the multimeter, feeling its familiar weight. Tools were meant to build things, not anchor you in place. His father had taught him that. Maybe it was time to build something new. "Well," he said finally, "I suppose we should start looking at apartments in Boston." Sarah's squeal of delight echoed through the small apartment, probably waking Mrs. Chen. But for once, James didn't worry about disturbing the neighbors. Sometimes, changes deserved a little noise. The mall felt different in the pre-dawn quiet, like a theater after the final curtain call. James stood at his booth, keys in hand, surrounded by 8 years of accumulated life. Amazing how much could fit in such a small space. Though, perhaps, not as amazing as how little of it he actually needed to take. "Need any help?" Mr. Wilson appeared, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the still dark food court. He must have used his owner's keys to get in early. "Thanks." James accepted the coffee. recognizing it as the fancy blend Tommy usually saved for special occasions. For everything, Jack. Taking over the repairs, helping with the transition. Least I could do. Mr. Wilson settled against the counter, his weathered face thoughtful. You know, when I opened that computer shop 20 years ago, I never thought I'd be inheriting customers from someone heading to a corporate CEO position. Technical Development Director, James corrected automatically, though the title still felt foreign on his tongue. And I'm not exactly joining the board. Close enough. Mr. Wilson watched as James began carefully packing his tools. You're really just taking the multimeter, everything else you can replace. But this, James held up his father's tool. Some things you carry forward. The morning light was just beginning to filter through the skylight when Sarah arrived with Mrs. Chen and Gloria in tow. All three carried boxes of what appeared to be homemade food. For the journey, Mrs. Chen insisted, though Boston was only a few hours away. And for the first week, city supermarkets are very expensive, you know. Gloria added her container to the growing pile. I made those oatmeal cookies you fixed my laptop over last month, the ones with cranberries. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Who's going to help me write my romance novels now? Jack's even better with computers than I am, James assured her, though they both knew it wasn't really about the repairs. Sarah began organizing the food boxes, while James continued his careful inventory. Each drawer revealed some forgotten memory, the spare parts he'd salvaged over the years, the handwritten repair notes, the thank you cards from grateful customers. He saved a few special ones, but left most for Jack, good karma for the booth's next chapter. Oh, Mrs. Chen exclaimed suddenly, I almost forgot. She hurried away, returning moments later with a small package wrapped in red paper. For luck, open it in your new office. The mall's early morning cleaning crew passed by, their usually efficient routine slowing as they reached the booth. James had fixed their buffer more times than he could count. The head custodian, Manuel, stopped to shake his hand. No words needed. Some gratitude transcended language. Dad? Sarah's voice was soft. The movers just texted. They're at the apartment. Reality settled in like dust after a repair job. This was really happening. Boston, Tech Future Industries, a chance to transform his small-town philosophy into something bigger. James Miller. Tommy's voice boomed across the empty mall as he jogged toward them, slightly out of breath. You didn't think you'd leave without breakfast, did you? He carried a huge basket filled with still warm pastries, all of James's favorites from years of morning trade-offs. Repairs for food, kindness for kindness, for the road, Tommy insisted, and because Sarah let slip that your new apartment's kitchen isn't set up yet. The growing collection of farewell food could have fed them for a month. James felt Sarah squeeze his hand, understanding in her gesture. They weren't just leaving a place. They were leaving a community that had become family. You should see the office they're giving him, Sarah told the gathered group, excitement breaking through the bittersweet moment. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a whole development lab, but no coffee maker yet, James added with a smile, thinking of his faithful old one, finally retired after 15 years. Mrs. Chen had insisted on keeping it, claiming she could still smell a hint of repair shop solder in its steam. As if reading his mind, Mr. Wilson pulled something from behind his back, a small box containing a simple coffee maker, not unlike James's old one. For the new office, something familiar to start with. The mall's main lights flickered on, signaling the approaching opening time. James took one last look around his booth, his home away from home for nearly a decade. The empty shelves gleamed, ready for their next purpose. The counter, cleared of his tools, seemed to wait expectantly for Jack's arrival later that morning. Time to go, he said quietly, picking up his father's multimeter. Sarah? She nodded, gathering some of the food boxes. The small crowd of early morning well-wishers followed them to the exit, a parade of memory and hope. At the mall entrance, James handed his keys to Mr. Wilson. The metal was warm from being clutched so long, years of security and responsibility. Passing from one set of capable hands to another, ready for your new beginning, Sarah asked, trying to balance Tommy's pastry basket while reaching for the door. James looked at his father's multimeter, then at the sunrise painting Boston's direction in promising shades of gold. Ready to start fixing things on a bigger scale, he replied and stepped forward into the next chapter. Tech Future Industries headquarters rose 60 stories into the Boston skyline, its glass exterior reflecting clouds and ambition in equal measure. James stood in his 38th floor office, his father's multimeter the only familiar object. In a sea of sleek modernity, a week into his new role, and he still felt like a character in someone else's story. Mr. Miller, his new assistant Kevin, appeared at the door. The product development team is ready for your presentation. James nodded, adjusting his tie. Another novelty in his new life. The simple button-downs of his repair booth days had given way to suits that cost more than his old monthly rent. Elizabeth had insisted on having her personal tailor fit him properly, claiming that confidence started with comfort. Also, Kevin added, Ms. Chen asked if you could stop by her office afterward. Something about the sustainability initiative? The elevator ride to the 45th floor conference room gave James time to observe the corporate ballet around him. Young executives hurried past, tablets in hand, speaking a language of acronyms and quarterly projections that still felt foreign. Yet beneath their polished surfaces, he recognized something familiar, the same look people had when bringing him their broken devices. Hope mixed with frustration, seeking solutions. James! Elizabeth's voice cut through his thoughts as he entered the conference room. She sat at the head of the table, elegant as always, in a burgundy suit. Perfect timing. We were just discussing your repair center proposal. The room held 12 of Tech Future's top executives, each representing a different division that his initiative would affect. James had memorized their names and roles, understanding that in this world, such knowledge was as crucial as knowing the internal layout of a smartphone. Before we begin, James said, placing his well-worn laptop beside the room's state-of-the-art presentation system, I'd like to show you something. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out Mrs. Chen's microwave's control board. His last. Repair from Preston Falls. This is why we're here today. This board was designed to fail after approximately 3 years of use, not through malice, but through prioritizing cost over longevity. The executives shifted uncomfortably. James continued, his hands moving over the board with familiar confidence. The fix costs less than $2 in parts, but we've created a system where replacing the entire unit is easier than repairing it. That's not just wasteful. It's a missed opportunity. For the next hour, James laid out his vision, not with PowerPoint slides or market projections, but with real examples from his years of repairs. Each piece of salvaged technology told a story of waste, of potential, of connection. We're not just fixing devices, he concluded. We're fixing relationships between people and technology, between companies and customers, between progress and sustainability. The room was quiet when he finished. Then Marcus Chen, head of manufacturing and Elizabeth's cousin, spoke up. This is all very idealistic, Mr. Miller, but the costs will be offset by customer loyalty and reduced materials waste, Elizabeth interrupted smoothly. James, wait for me in my office. We should discuss implementation details. In Elizabeth's office half an hour later, James watched Boston's afternoon traffic far below. They think I'm naive, he said without turning around. They think you're disruptive, Elizabeth corrected, joining him at the window, which is exactly why I hired you. The old ways aren't working, James. We need someone who sees both the forest and the trees, or in your case, both the devices and the people who use them. She handed him a folder. Your budget approval came through, double what we initially discussed. James raised an eyebrow. The board agreed to that? Let's just say your presentation about Mrs. Chen's microwave was very convincing, Elizabeth smiled. Sometimes the simplest examples are the most powerful. A notification popped up on James's phone. Sarah sending a photo of her MIT campus tour group. Her early admission interview had gone well. The tour, just a formality now. Another piece of their new life falling into place. You know, Elizabeth said, noting the photo, there's a reason I pushed for that budget increase. The Repair Center initiative needs someone to oversee technical education programs, someone who understands both the engineering and the human elements, someone young, perhaps with fresh perspectives. James looked up sharply. Sarah's 17 and brilliant from what I hear. The internship would start next summer, assuming she's interested. Perfect timing for an MIT freshman, don't you think? Before James could respond, Kevin appeared. With urgent papers requiring Elizabeth's attention. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and James, the tie looks good on you, but don't let the suit change how you see things. That's not why you're here. Alone in her office, James touched his father's multimeter in his pocket. A habit now, a grounding rod in this new world of glass and steel. Outside, Boston's sunset painted the sky in shades of possibility. Not so different from the ones he'd watched from his repair booth window. Different view, same purpose, fixing what was broken, one piece at a time. The prototype sat on James's desk like a fallen star, Tech Future's most anticipated product in a decade, and it wouldn't turn on. 3 engineering teams had already failed to solve the problem, and the company's stock had dropped 8 points since news of the delay leaked. In 12 hours, Elizabeth would face the board, and James knew her position wasn't as secure as everyone assumed. What makes this one so special? Sarah asked over video chat, her MIT acceptance letter visible on the wall behind her. She'd been accepted early decision, a fact that still made James's heart swell with pride. It's supposed to be different, James replied, angling his phone so she could see the device. Self-repairing circuits, modular design, 10-year warranty, everything I've been pushing for if it works. And if it doesn't? James glanced at Elizabeth's message from an hour ago. The board's getting nervous. Marcus is suggesting we scrap the sustainability features and rush a conventional version to market. I need good news, James. Then a lot of people lose faith in the idea that doing the right thing can also be good business, he answered, reaching for his father's multimeter. The office had emptied hours ago, Boston's nightlife now providing the only illumination beyond his desk lamp. James had shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, returning to the familiar comfort of hands-on problem-solving. Want some company while you work? Sarah offered. I could read you my physics. Homework. Thanks, sweetie, but you should sleep. Big day tomorrow, says the man who's still at the office at midnight. She gave him a pointed look. You know, Mom always said you did your best work when you were talking things through. James smiled, remembering Emily's patient listening during his early repair shop days. Your mother was usually right. Usually. Sarah raised an eyebrow exactly like her mother used to. Always, James corrected. Okay, let me walk you through this. For the next hour, James narrated his process, Sarah occasionally offering insights that reminded him why MIT had been so eager to accept her. The prototype's complexity was beautiful, layers of innovation built on principles James had been preaching since his booth days. Wait, Sarah interrupted his explanation of the self-repair system. Show me that circuit board again. James adjusted the camera. See something? Maybe. Dad, remember that old radio you helped me fix last year? The one that kept resetting itself? The interference problem? James paused, neurons firing. Sarah, you're brilliant. His fingers flew over the prototype, making minute adjustments. The solution wasn't in the device's cutting-edge features, but in a basic principle he'd learned in his father's shop. Sometimes signals get crossed when you try to do too much at once. James? Elizabeth's voice made him jump. She stood in his office doorway, still in her meeting clothes. I thought I saw your light on. Elizabeth, I think we... He stopped, noting her expression. "What's wrong?" "Marcus called an emergency board meeting for 7 a.m. He's making a play to redirect the entire sustainability initiative, claims it's fiscally irresponsible in the current market." She ran a hand through her usually perfect hair. "Without a working prototype?" "Dad," Sarah's voice came through the phone. "Show her." James pressed the power button on the prototype. The device hummed to life, its display glowing with a soft, perfect light. Elizabeth moved closer, hardly breathing. "Is it fully functional?" James confirmed. "The self-repair system works. The modular design is solid. Everything we promised, everything we said was possible. It's all here." "How did you—" "Sometimes you need to step back to see the simple solution," James said. "Sarah helped me spot it." Elizabeth picked up the prototype with reverent hands. "Do you know what this means? This isn't just a product, it's proof that sustainability and profitability can coexist, that doing the right thing isn't just good. Ethics, it's good business." She placed the device carefully back on the desk and did something very un-CEO-like. She hugged James. "Thank you," she whispered. "Dad?" Sarah's voice held a mix of amusement and satisfaction. "I should go to bed. Looks like you've got some board meeting prep to do." After ending the call, James and Elizabeth spent the next 2 hours preparing their presentation. The prototype sat between them, a bridge between old values and new possibilities. "No," Elizabeth said as they finished. "I knew you were the right choice when you fixed my laptop for free. Not because of the repair itself, but because you took the time to explain why it had failed in the first place." "Old habits," James shrugged. "Good habits," she corrected. "Ones this company needs." She gathered her papers, then paused at the door. "The board meets in 4 hours. Get some rest, James. Tomorrow we change the future of technology repair. One device at a time?" He smiled. "One principle at a time," she replied. "And James?" "Sarah's internship offer. After tonight, I'm thinking we might need to adjust the job title. Technical Innovation Consultant has a nice ring to it." After she left, James sat with the prototype, his father's multimeter beside it. 2 generations of fixing things, of believing that broken didn't mean finished. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, in his quiet office high above Boston, everything worked exactly as it should. The prototype sat on James's desk like a fallen star, Tech Future's most anticipated product in a decade, and it wouldn't turn on. 3 engineering teams had already failed to solve the problem, and the company's stock had dropped 8 points since news of the delay leaked. In 12 hours, Elizabeth would face the board, and James knew her position wasn't as secure as everyone assumed. "What makes this one so special?" Sarah asked over video chat, her MIT acceptance letter visible on the wall behind her. She'd been accepted early decision, a fact that still made James's heart swell with pride. "It's supposed to be different," James replied, angling his phone so she could see the device. "Self-repairing circuits, modular design, 10-year warranty, everything I've been pushing for if it works. And if it doesn't?" James glanced at Elizabeth's message from an hour ago. "The board's getting nervous. Marcus is suggesting we scrap the sustainability features and rush a conventional version to market." "I need good news, James." "Then a lot of people lose faith in the idea that doing the right thing can also be good business," he answered, reaching for his father's multimeter. The office had emptied hours ago, Boston's nightlife now providing the only illumination beyond his desk lamp. James had shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, returning to the familiar comfort of hands-on problem-solving. "Want some company while you work?" Sarah offered. "I could read you my physics." "Homework." "Thanks, sweetie, but you should sleep. Big day tomorrow," says the man who's still at the office at midnight. She gave him a pointed look. "You know, Mom always said you did your best work when you were talking things through." James smiled, remembering Emily's patient listening during his early repair shop days. "Your mother was usually right." "Usually." Sarah raised an eyebrow exactly like her mother used to. Always, James corrected. Okay, let me walk you through this. For the next hour, James narrated his process, Sarah occasionally offering insights that reminded him why MIT had been so eager to accept her. The prototype's complexity was beautiful, layers of innovation built on principles James had been preaching since his booth days. Wait, Sarah interrupted his explanation of the self-repair system. Show me that circuit board again. James adjusted the camera. See something? Maybe. Dad, remember that old radio you helped me fix last year? The one that kept resetting itself? The interference problem? James paused, neurons firing. Sarah, you're brilliant. His fingers flew over the prototype, making minute adjustments. The solution wasn't in the device's cutting-edge features, but in a basic principle he'd learned in his father's shop. Sometimes signals get crossed when you try to do too much at once. James? Elizabeth's voice made him jump. She stood in his office doorway, still in her meeting clothes. I thought I saw your light on. Elizabeth, I think we... He stopped, noting her expression. What's wrong? Marcus called an emergency board meeting for 7 a.m. He's making a play to redirect the entire sustainability initiative, claims it's fiscally irresponsible in the current market. She ran a hand through her usually perfect hair. Without a working prototype? Dad, Sarah's voice came through the phone. Show her. James pressed the power button on the prototype. The device hummed to life, its display glowing with a soft, perfect light. Elizabeth moved closer, hardly breathing. Is it fully functional? James confirmed. The self-repair system works. The modular design is solid. Everything we promised, everything we said was possible. It's all here. How did you... Sometimes you need to step back to see the simple solution, James said. Sarah helped me spot it. Elizabeth picked up the prototype with reverent hands. Do you know what this means? This isn't just a product. It's proof that sustainability and profitability can coexist. That doing the right thing isn't just good. Ethics, it's good business. She placed the device carefully back on the desk and did something very un-CEO-like. She hugged James. Thank you, she whispered. Dad? Sarah's voice held a mix of amusement and satisfaction. I should go to bed. Looks like you've got some board meeting prep to do. After ending the call, James and Elizabeth spent the next 2 hours preparing their presentation. The prototype sat between them, a bridge between old values and new possibilities. No, Elizabeth said as they finished. I knew you were the right choice when you fixed my laptop for free. Not because of the repair itself, but because you took the time to explain why it had failed in the first place. Old habits, James shrugged. Good habits, she corrected. Ones this company needs. She gathered her papers, then paused at the door. The board meets in 4 hours. Get some rest, James. Tomorrow we change the future of technology repair. One device at a time? He smiled. One principle at a time, she replied. And James? Sarah's internship offer. After tonight, I'm thinking we might need to adjust the job title. Technical Innovation Consultant has a nice ring to it. After she left, James sat with the prototype, his father's multimeter beside it. 2 generations of fixing things, of believing that broken didn't mean finished. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, in his quiet office high above Boston, everything worked exactly as it should. The corporate memo landed like a thunderbolt on a clear day. James read it 3 times, each review making his stomach sink further. The accusations were carefully worded, but clear. Conflict of interest, preferential contract allocation, inappropriate, personal relationships affecting business decisions. It's Marcus, Elizabeth said, pacing her office. She'd shed her usual composed demeanor, anger and hurt, visible in every movement. He's using our dinner as leverage, claims the entire sustainability. Initiative is compromised by us, James finished quietly. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, storm clouds gathered over Boston, matching the mood within. The dinner had been perfect. intimate conversation over candlelight, shared stories about their father's repair shops, laughter about Sarah's latest, text updates demanding details. They'd even planned a second date. Now, barely 12 hours later, their professional and personal worlds were colliding in the worst possible way. "He's presenting to the board tomorrow," Elizabeth continued, "using the repair center contracts as evidence. Claims we favored small businesses over corporate partners because of your emotional attachment to your old community." "Those businesses were the most qualified," James protested. "We vetted every application, followed every protocol." "I know," Elizabeth stopped pacing, "but Marcus has turned it into a narrative about fiscal responsibility versus sentimental choices. He's pushing for a complete review of the initiative, suggesting we pause all current projects." James's phone buzzed, Sarah sending her usual morning message. His thumb hovered over the screen, unsure how to tell her that their carefully built new life might be unraveling. "There's more," Elizabeth said softly. "The board, they're suggesting separating our departments, moving the repair initiative under Marcus's division." The implication was clear. Everything they'd built together, all their shared dreams of changing how people thought about technology and sustainability, would be stripped down to mere profit margins. A knock at the door made them both jump. Kevin entered, his usually cheerful face serious. "Miss Chen, the board members are asking about the quarterly projections and there are reporters in the lobby. Someone leaked the memo." Elizabeth's professional mask slipped back into place, but James caught the flicker of pain in her eyes. "Tell them I'll have a statement shortly." "And James," she hesitated, "maybe we should postpone any personal—" "Of course," he said quickly, professionally, as if his heart wasn't cracking like a dropped smartphone screen. "I should review those contract files anyway." Back in his office, James found himself holding his father's multimeter, its familiar weight offering little comfort. His computer chimed with incoming emails, support from repair center partners, confused questions from team members, a particularly painful note from Gloria asking if this meant her laptop repairs would have to go somewhere else now. "Dad," Sarah's voice came through his phone's speaker. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" James stared at the wall of certificates and commendations they'd earned over the past months. Proof of concept, proof of success, proof that doing the right thing could also be good business. "I don't know, sweetie. Is it true? About you and Miss Chen, we had dinner once, and now Marcus is using it to attack everything you've built," Sarah finished. Her voice held a familiar determination, the same tone she'd used when defending her MIT dreams. "Dad, remember what you taught me about complex repairs? Document everything," James said automatically. "Create a clear trail of—" He stopped. "An idea forming." "Exactly," Sarah said. "You kept records of everything, right? Every decision, every contract evaluation?" James was already pulling up files. "Every single one, including Marcus's rejected proposals for automated replacement programs instead of repairs." "Good." Sarah's smile was audible. "Now, about Ms. Chen." "Sarah, I can't—" "Dad," her voice softened. "You always say the hardest part of fixing something is deciding it's worth the effort. Is this worth fixing?" Before he could answer, his office door opened. Elizabeth stood there, looking both vulnerable and determined. "James, the board wants to see all contract documentation, everything we use to make our decisions." He met her eyes, seeing past the professional facade to the woman he'd shared stories with over Italian food and candlelight. "I have it all. Every evaluation, every comparison, every reason we chose each partner. I'll help." Sarah called through the phone. "I did half those analysis simulations anyway." Elizabeth moved closer, hope fighting with caution in her expression. "We can't. Personal considerations can't affect our professional decisions." "They never have," James said firmly. "Every choice we made was based on merit, on shared values about sustainability and community impact. We can prove that." "And the other thing?" Elizabeth asked quietly. "Us. James thought about his father's words regarding difficult repairs. Sometimes you have to step back, let things cool down, before you can see the path forward clearly. First, we fight for what we built, he said. Then we figure out the rest together. Elizabeth's professional mask cracked just enough to show a smile. Together. Sarah, still there? We could use your data analysis skills. Already pulling up the spreadsheets, Sarah replied. Nobody messes with my dad's happiness or his repair centers, especially not some suit who thinks sustainability is just a buzzword. Outside, the storm clouds began to break, letting through rays of afternoon sun. Sometimes, James thought, setbacks were just opportunities to prove how much something mattered, whether it was a business model, a relationship, or both. The Tech Future boardroom felt more like a courtroom that morning, with James and Elizabeth on one side, Marcus and his allies on the other, and a row of stern-faced board members between them. James had brought only 2 items, his laptop and his father's multimeter, the latter sitting before him like a talisman. Before we begin, Elizabeth said, her voice steady despite the tension, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Yes, James Miller and I had dinner together. One dinner, after months of successful professional collaboration. If that dinner clouds your judgment about the revolutionary work we've done, then perhaps we should examine our priorities as a company. Marcus leaned forward, smooth and practiced. This isn't about dinner, Elizabeth. It's about emotional decision-making compromising our fiscal responsibility. These community repair centers are a drain on resources that could be better allocated to automated replacement programs. James opened his laptop, connecting it to the room's display system. Interesting perspective, Marcus. Let's look at some numbers. The screen filled with data, charts, graphs, and most importantly, comparisons. These are the actual costs and benefits of our repair initiative versus the automated replacement program you proposed. Sarah, my daughter and our summer intern, helped compile this analysis. The board members leaned forward as James walked them through the figures. Cost savings from reduced waste, customer loyalty metrics, environmental impact assessments. With each slide, the story became clearer. But the most telling data, James continued, picking up his father's multimeter, comes from this. Not this specific tool, but what it represents. Every repair center we've opened has a wall displaying tools passed down through generations of fixers. Know why? He paused, making eye contact with each board member. Because trust is generational. When people bring us their broken devices, they're not just trusting our technical skills, they're trusting our commitment to something bigger than quarterly profits. Elizabeth stepped in seamlessly. The numbers support this. Customer retention in areas with repair centers is up 40%. Brand loyalty metrics have doubled. We're not just fixing devices. We're building relationships that last generations. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Pretty words. But business isn't about sentiment. No, James interrupted, pulling up a new document. It's about integrity. This is your internal memo from 6 months ago, suggesting we deliberately design products with shorter lifespans to drive replacement sales. Care to explain how that aligns with shareholder interests? The boardroom grew very quiet. Marcus's face flushed as his own words appeared on screen. What we're doing, Elizabeth said into the silence, isn't just good ethics. It's good business. We're proving that sustainability and profitability aren't mutually exclusive. The board chairman, Dr. Chen, Elizabeth's father, spoke for the first time. Marcus, is this memo authentic? Uncle, I can explain. James, Dr. Chen interrupted, in your repair center proposal, you mentioned something about understanding why things break. Would you elaborate? James held up the multimeter. My father taught me that everything tells you why it failed, if you listen carefully enough. Sometimes it's physical wear, sometimes it's poor design, and sometimes, he looked at Marcus, it's because someone decided breaking was more profitable than fixing. And you, Elizabeth? Dr. Chen turned to his daughter. Your judgment in this initiative has been questioned. Your personal relationship with Mr. Miller has been cited as evidence of compromised decision-making. Elizabeth stood straighter. Every decision we've made is documented, justified, and producing results beyond projections. As for my personal life, I learned from you, Father, that integrity means being honest about what matters, both professionally and personally. Dr. Chen nodded slowly, then smiled. Marcus, your services will no longer be required. Please clear your office by end of day. He turned to the board. I move to fully endorse the Repair Center initiative with increased funding for expansion. The vote was unanimous. After the room cleared, James and Elizabeth stood by the window, watching Boston's morning traffic far below. Your father, James said carefully. He knew about Marcus's memo already, didn't he? Elizabeth smiled. He needed to see how we'd handle it, both the business challenge and the personal accusations. She touched the multimeter on the table. He has my grandfather's old tools displayed in his home office, you know. Must run in the family, James said, understanding what needs fixing and what's already working perfectly. Speaking of which, Elizabeth turned to face him. About that second dinner we had to postpone. James's phone buzzed. Sarah, of course. Did you win? Did you save the company? More importantly, did you save your love life? Details, Dad. Elizabeth read the message over his shoulder and laughed. She's going to be an incredible asset to the company one day. Already is, James said softly, showing Elizabeth the final slide Sarah had prepared. A simple graph showing the correlation between Repair Center success and community trust. She understands what we're really building here. And what's that? A future worth fixing, James replied, reaching for her hand. Some connections, after all, were too important to let break. The blueprint spread across James's new office wall like a vision of the future. Dozens of repair centers, each connected by lines of cooperation and shared expertise. But it was the small details that made him smile. Dedicated training areas, with walls displaying legacy tools, community education spaces, and apprenticeship programs for local youth. Admiring your handiwork? Elizabeth asked from the doorway. Since the board meeting 2 weeks ago, she'd taken to dropping by more casually, their professional rhythm enhanced rather than complicated by their growing personal connection. Our handiwork? James corrected, making space for her at the blueprint. Sarah's latest simulation shows we can have 20 centers operational by year's end. Elizabeth traced one of the connection lines with her finger. Speaking of Sarah, have you seen her proposal for the education program? She's suggesting we partner with technical schools, create a certification path for repair specialists. Like a modern version of my father's apprenticeship program. James nodded, thinking of the old shop where he'd learned his trade. Actually, I wanted to show you something. He led Elizabeth to a covered display case in the corner. This arrived this morning from Preston Falls. Removing the cloth, he revealed a carefully preserved sign, Murray's Fix-It Shop, where broken things find new life. Your father's shop sign, Elizabeth said softly, recognizing it from his stories. Mrs. Chen found it in her basement of all. And places. Apparently she bought it at the auction when the shop closed, kept it all these years, just in case. He chuckled. She said it was waiting for the right moment. Elizabeth studied the sign. Its hand-painted letters faded, but still clear. We should display it in the first new center, along with my grandfather's sign from Taiwan. She paused, then added, Dad found it last weekend. He thinks it's time to show people where all this really started. The personal significance wasn't lost on either of them. Dr. Chen's endorsement had extended beyond the boardroom to quiet family dinners, where James found himself welcomed not just as a business partner, but as something more. Actually, James said, I had another idea. He pulled up a new design on his tablet. What if each repair center told a story? Not just our family's stories, but the community's story. Local repair shops that closed, tools that were passed down, techniques that were almost lost. A living history of fixing things, Elizabeth finished, catching his vision. Showing that what we're building isn't new. It's a revival of something valuable we almost lost. Exactly. Sarah's already creating a database. People are sending in photos, tools, stories. It's becoming more than just repair centers. It's becoming a movement. Elizabeth's hand found his, a gesture that felt increasingly natural. You know, when I brought you that broken laptop, I thought I was just finding someone to fix a computer. Instead, you fixed an entire industry, James suggested with a smile. We fixed it, she corrected. All of us. You, me, Sarah, every person who believed that broken doesn't mean finished. James's phone buzzed. Another update from Sarah. MIT's interested in collaborating on the certification program. Also, when are you two announcing your engagement? The betting pool at the office is getting ridiculous. Elizabeth laughed, reading the message. Your daughter is nothing if not direct. Gets it from her mother, James said softly, then paused. Emily would have loved all this, you know. The repair centers, the education programs, the way it's all coming together. Tell me about her? Elizabeth asked, leading them to the comfortable chairs they'd added to his office for their frequent strategy sessions. For the next hour, James shared stories about Emily, her passion for teaching, her belief in second chances, her influence on Sarah's determined spirit. Elizabeth listened, adding her own memories of her late mother, two women they'd lost too soon, but whose values still shaped their lives. They'd probably be running this whole program better than we are, James concluded. Maybe, Elizabeth smiled. But I think they'd be proud of what we're building. Not just the centers, but everything. The blueprint caught the afternoon light, casting subtle shadows that made the connection lines seem to move, like a living network of possibility. James thought about paths taken and choices made, about broken things made whole again, about love lost and found. You know, he said, Sarah's right about one thing. We should probably make some announcements soon about us, about the program expansion, about us first, Elizabeth said firmly, because Sarah's other text is right too. The office betting pool is getting out of hand. Kevin's tracking spreadsheet crashed the server yesterday. James laughed, then grew serious. You're sure? About all of it? Elizabeth stood, pulling him up with her. She walked them to the blueprint, their shared vision spread out before them. Some things you just know are worth fixing, worth building, worth fighting for. This program, this mission, this relationship. I'm sure about all of it, even the complicated parts. Especially those, she smiled. After all, the complicated repairs are always the most satisfying when they finally work right. Outside his office window, Boston's skyline stretched toward the horizon, each building a potential home for their growing vision. But it was here, in this moment, that the future felt most real. In shared purpose, in healing what was broken, in building something that would last generations. Theatre tickets weren't exactly repair tools, but as James held them, he couldn't help but see the symmetry. Their first official date, no business discussions allowed, Sarah had insisted, would be at Boston's historic Orpheum Theatre, watching a play about second chances and renewed beginnings. It's not too fancy, he asked Sarah over FaceTime, adjusting his tie for the third time. No suit jacket this time. Elizabeth had specifically requested James from the repair shop, not James, the corporate director. Dad, Sarah rolled her eyes. You fixed the theatre's vintage sound system last month. The manager probably would have given you the owner's box if you'd asked. She paused, then added softly, Mum would love this, you know. You finding happiness again. James touched the small photo of Emily he kept on his dresser. She'd love Elizabeth. They have the same way of seeing through excuses to what really matters. Speaking of what matters, Sarah grinned, don't forget what we talked about. No shop talk, no repair center discussions, no sustainability initiatives, just two people getting to know each other outside the office. When did you become such a relationship expert? Someone had to, she teased. You spent the last 17 years fixing everything except your love life. The doorbell rang, and James's heart did a small jump. That's her. Wish me luck? You don't need luck, Dad. Just be yourself. The self that sees the worth in broken things and believes in second chances. Elizabeth stood at his door, wearing a simple blue dress, looking somehow both familiar and brand new. No tie, she said immediately, reaching up to loosen it. Remember? Just us tonight. The tie joined his corporate identity on the dresser, and suddenly they were just James and Elizabeth. Not the CEO and technical director, not the corporate power duo transforming an industry. Just two people who'd found each other through a broken laptop and a belief in fixing things. The evening air held the first hint of autumn as they walked to the theater, her hand comfortable in his. They talked about everything except work, childhood, memories, favorite books, the small coincidences that had shaped their lives. My mother used to say that broken hearts were like broken machines, Elizabeth shared as they found their seats. The repair isn't about making them new again, but about making them work better because of what they've been through. Smart woman, James said. She and my father would have had fascinating conversations, like we do. Elizabeth's eyes held a warmth that had nothing to do with business partnerships. Better, James smiled. They wouldn't have taken months to admit they were falling in love. The words slipped out naturally, hanging in the air between them like a truth finally spoken. Elizabeth's hand tightened in his. Well, she said, her voice soft but sure, some repairs take time to get right. The play was beautiful, but James would remember more about how Elizabeth leaned against his shoulder during the second act, how she wiped away tears during the emotional climax, how her laughter at the comic relief felt like a private gift. After, they walked through the public garden, the late-night landscape creating a bubble of privacy in the heart of the city. Sarah texted during intermission, Elizabeth admitted. Wanted to know if we'd stopped being ridiculous and admitted our feelings yet? James laughed. She's been my relationship coach through all this. Apparently I needed the help. We both did. Elizabeth stopped by the lake, moonlight playing, on the water. You know, that day you fixed my laptop, I wasn't just impressed by your technical skills. It was the way you listened, really listened, to what I was trying to accomplish. No one in the corporate world had done that in years. And I was captivated by how passionate you were about making real change, James said. Not just talking about sustainability, but willing to rebuild an entire industry to make it happen. We make a good team. We make a good everything, James corrected, drawing her closer. The kiss, when it came, felt like the final piece of a complex repair falling perfectly into place. When they parted, Elizabeth's smile held the same satisfaction she showed when one of their initiatives succeeded perfectly. Sarah's going to be insufferable about this, James murmured. She already is. She's been texting me advice for weeks. Elizabeth laughed. Yesterday, she sent me a detailed analysis of why we're perfect for each other, complete with charts. That's my girl. Never met a problem she couldn't solve with enough data. They walked home hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing, the future stretching before them like a blueprint filled with possibility. Sometimes, James thought, the best repairs weren't about fixing what was broken, but about building something entirely new from the pieces life gave you. The house keys felt significant in James's hand, brass, not electronic, because some things were better kept traditional. The Victorian in Cambridge hadn't been his first choice. Too grand, he'd argued. Or Elizabeth's, too much renovation needed, she'd worried, but Sarah had taken one look and declared it perfect. It's literally a metaphor for your relationship, she'd said during the final walkthrough. Beautiful bones, need some fixing, but absolutely worth the effort. Then she'd promptly claimed the third-floor bedroom with the bay window overlooking the MIT campus, for visits during breaks, of course. Now standing in the foyer with Elizabeth, watching the moving trucks pull away, James understood what Sarah had seen. Like everything in their lives, the house was about potential, about taking something old and respected and giving it new purpose. Your father's multimeter definitely belongs here, Elizabeth said, placing the cherished tool on the mantelpiece next to her grandfather's model. The two instruments, nearly identical despite their separate journeys, caught the morning light filtering through antique windows. "First repair?" James asked, noting how the chandelier swayed slightly off-center. Elizabeth smiled, sliding her arms around his waist. "Later. First, I want to show you something." She led him to what would be their shared home office, where a large package waited, wrapped in familiar red paper. "Mrs. Chen sent it," she explained. "Said it was time." Inside, they found his father's old workbench logbook, its pages filled with decades of repair notes, customer stories, and wisdom passed down through generations. But it was what lay beneath that caught James's breath: his mother's wedding. "A ring, which he'd thought lost years ago, Emily knew," he said softly, reading the note tucked inside. "She gave it to Mrs. Chen for safekeeping, asked her to save it until James's heart was ready for repair." Elizabeth touched the ring gently. "She must have known you'd need time, that some fixes can't be rushed. Like us?" "Like us." She smiled, and then reached into her pocket, "Which makes this rather perfect timing." She pulled out a small box of her own. "I was going to wait, make some grand gesture, but here feels right. Now feels right." The ring inside was elegant but understated, exactly what he would have chosen. "Elizabeth, marry me, James," she said simply. "Help me build something that will last generations in every way that matters." He answered by sliding his mother's ring onto her finger, a perfect fit that seemed somehow inevitable. Her ring found its home on his hand moments later, both of them laughing through tears at their shared timing. Sarah's FaceTime call came seconds later, as if she'd been watching through some cosmic security camera. "Finally! Do you know how hard it was keeping both your proposal plans secret from each other? Also, I already drafted designs for the repair center we're building in the carriage house out back." "The what?" James asked. "Oh." Sarah looked sheepish. "Surprise. Elizabeth's wedding. Gift to you. I might have helped with the permits, and the equipment list, and the community education program proposal." Elizabeth laughed at James's expression. "I was going to surprise you next week. It's perfect, really. Historic building, prominent. Location walking distance to MIT for student apprenticeships. And convenient for family dinners," Sarah added, "because obviously I'm apprenticing there every break. Someone has to keep you two focused on actual repairs instead of just making heart eyes at each other." After ending the call and promising Sarah veto power on wedding colors, James and Elizabeth stood in their new home, surrounded by boxes and potential and love. Through the windows, Cambridge bustled with academic energy, while the carriage house waited patiently for its new purpose. "You know," James said, "when you brought me that laptop, if someone had told me this was where it would lead, you'd have fixed it anyway," Elizabeth finished, "because that's who you are, who we are. We fix things, we build things, we make things better." Speaking of fixing things, James gestured to the chandelier with an exaggerated sigh. Elizabeth grabbed his father's multimeter from the mantelpiece. "First repair in our new home seems auspicious," as they worked together, falling into their familiar rhythm of collaboration and companionship. James thought about cycles and repairs and love, about how sometimes the most important fixes weren't about broken things at all, but about building connections, about creating spaces where things could be made whole again. The chandelier chimed softly as they adjusted it, its crystals catching the light like promises. Outside, autumn painted Harvard Square in shades of gold and possibility, while inside, two families' legacies of fixing things merged into something new and wonderful. Some repairs, James knew now, weren't about restoring what was lost, but about creating something that had never existed before, something even better, stronger, and more beautiful for having been built together. The grand opening of the Cambridge Heritage Repair Centre felt more like a family reunion than a corporate event. James stood in the restored carriage house, now a perfect blend of historical charm and modern technology, watching as worlds merged. Around him, Mrs. Chen was teaching Elizabeth's father the proper technique for folding dumplings in the community kitchen space, while Gloria held court in the education centre, her ancient laptop still running perfectly as she regaled MIT students with tales of romance novels written on properly built machines. Mr. Peterson's mall-walking group had somehow convinced the Tech Future board members to join them for morning exercises in the garden. "Dad!" Sarah's voice carried across the main repair floor. "Stop daydreaming and come help me show these engineering students how to properly diagnose a circuit board." At 20, Sarah had grown into her role as the center's chief innovation officer with the same determination she brought to everything. Her MIT professors had quickly learned to schedule around her repair center hours, recognizing that she was teaching as much as learning. "Remember," James heard her telling the students, "anyone can replace parts. We're teaching you to understand why things fail, how to prevent those failures, and most importantly, how to help others do the same." Elizabeth appeared at his side, sliding her hand into his. Her wedding ring caught the light from the restored Victorian windows. "She sounds just like you know." "Poor kid." James smiled, squeezing her hand. "Though I think she's got more of her mother in her than she realizes. Emily always could command a room while teaching." Speaking of teaching, Elizabeth nodded toward the front door, where a familiar face had just appeared. Jack Wilson stood awkwardly in the entrance, holding a box of old repair manuals. "Heard you might be able to use these," he said gruffly, "for the historical display." James crossed to his old friend, embracing him warmly. "You're late. First class of small business owners starts in 10 minutes. Pretty sure you promised to teach them about inventory management?" Jack's eyes widened. "You still want—" "Of course we do," Elizabeth joined them. Who better to teach sustainable business practices than the man who kept independent repair shops alive when everyone else was closing down? The morning unfolded like a well-maintained mechanism, each part working in harmony. Local shop owners learned alongside corporate executives. Teenagers taught retirees about smartphone diagnostics, while elderly craftsmen demonstrated soldering techniques that had nearly become lost arts. "You know what this reminds me of?" Sarah said during a quiet moment as they watched the busy repair floor from the mezzanine. "Your old booth. Same energy, same purpose, just bigger." James touched his father's multimeter, now mounted alongside Elizabeth's grandfather's, in a place of honor. Below them, a wall of photographs told the story of repair through generations. Murray's Fix-It Shop, the Chen family store in Taiwan, James's mall booth, and dozens of other local repair shops that had shaped their communities. "We're not just fixing devices anymore," Elizabeth said, joining them. "We're fixing the relationship between people and technology, between progress and preservation, between profit and purpose, between past and future," Sarah added, then grinned. "Speaking of which," she pulled out her tablet, showing them the latest data. "The Preston Falls Centre opens next month, and guess who's running it?" "Tommy from the food court," James guessed, remembering the young man's keen interest in their training programs. "With Mrs. Chen as community outreach coordinator," Sarah confirmed. "She's already planned the menu for the opening day dumplings. Oh, and Gloria's teaching a workshop on maintaining vintage technology, something about romance and properly maintained. And hardware being a perfect match," Elizabeth laughed. "She's not wrong about any of it." She leaned into James's side, watching their vision unfold below. "We did it, didn't we? Actually change things?" "You did more than change things," Dr. Chen said, approaching with a stack of international press coverage. "You started a movement. The European Union is adopting our repair certification standards. Asian markets are implementing similar programs. Even our competitors are realizing that sustainability isn't just good ethics. It's good business. And good love stories, Sarah added with a wink, dodging her father's playful swat. As the day wound down, James found himself back on the main floor, helping a young girl repair her grandmother's music box. "See?" he explained, showing her how the mechanism worked. "Sometimes the most precious things just need a little care to keep playing their song." Elizabeth watched from nearby, her eyes soft. "Ready to go home? I think that chandelier is still slightly off-center. Always one more repair to do," he smiled, taking her hand. "Always one more thing to make better," she corrected. Together. They walked home through the Cambridge evening, past MIT's gleaming buildings where Sarah would soon graduate, past the Victorian homes that had welcomed their blend of old and new, past the future. They were building one fixed thing at a time. At home, the chandelier's crystals danced with welcome light, just slightly imperfect. A reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things weren't about perfection, but about the joy of continuous improvement, of caring enough to make things better, of loving what was broken until it sang again. After all, James thought, watching Elizabeth reach for their shared toolkit, the best repairs were always about more than fixing what was broken. They were about building something new, something lasting, something worth passing down through generations, something like love.